Looking overseas, Hong Kong has lifted a weekend lockdown on the Jordan district, which was imposed so authorities could test residents in the area for the coronavirus.
More than 7,000 people have been tested, with 13 returning positive results. Secretary for Food and Health Sophia Chan said the authorities are not ruling out similar operations in the future. She noted that the current strategy of issuing notices to people for compulsory testing has been effective, with most complying.
Here with the latest is our Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang. Claire, Jordan's lockdown was lifted overnight. Is the district already back to normal?
Hi, Yan. It's business as usual for now, but people who've got shops in the restricted area has complained that they've suffered great financial losses over the weekend, right? And some are afraid that that might continue even as Chinese New Year, usually a good time to make profits, right? Approaches due to the stigma with the area. Now, when you say Jordan or Yau Ma Tei, it's like, it's a bit dirty, you know? So you've got a stigma there. And then residents also have had much to say about the execution of the lockdown. They've described it as confusing. They said that it's not well thought out. A silver lining, perhaps, was the fact that the government allowed those who were tested and negative of COVID-19 to go in and out of the area before the 48 hours. Actually, they were allowed to go out to buy food. So many of them actually rushed out to line up to get out of the area to buy food from 6 p.m. yesterday.
Well, Claire, the purpose of locking down Jordan over the weekend was to facilitate compulsory mass testing for residents in that area. So based on the reactions that you mentioned, as well as the effectiveness of that testing exercise, will we see other district-specific lockdowns?
Well, first of all, this lockdown is different from the ones you had in Singapore and elsewhere. It's basically preventing movement of people in an area, a small-scale area, in order to test them. It was over the weekend, 48 hours, and even before the 48 hours, people free of COVID could roam around. Now, second, Hong Kong has employed various types of testing exercises, Ollie. We first had the voluntary mass exercises. There was one in last September. And then we've been having targeted testing for high-risk groups, which started very early for, people like taxi drivers, frontline-facing staff, F&B, nursing homes, and now helpers, and then there's compulsory testing notices where, these notices are issued for buildings. So residents in those buildings have to, go for testing. And obviously, if they're found to not go for testing, they are in breach and they will be either fined or they have to go to jail. So they've lowered this threshold in the Yau Zimbong area. So any building with just one case, I think previously it was like at least two, will mean that all the people in the entire building will have to, go for tests. And then buildings with sewage pipe samples with the virus will also be issued notices, so they also have to go for tests. So then there's this over the weekend, which happened, right? The small-scale lockdown to test everyone. So as Secretary for Food and Health Sophia Chan noted, right, voluntary and mandatory testing have been effective. So health experts here believe a lockdown is not necessary or cost-effective. But then the government has not ruled it out yet. They have said that they will consider it again, depending on the situation. And then what happened yesterday was that one of the advisors on the advisory panel on the government's anti-epidemic efforts is Professor David Hui, who then suggested that the government actually might want to have a mini lockdown in the fruit market that's next to the Jordan area, because there are a lot of cases surrounding the fruit market that has gone up. So, I think for the government, they have to review and then they play by ear.
Right. So Claire, apart from district-specific lockdowns, what about mass testing? Is mass testing the way to go in Hong Kong, or are experts still advising a more targeted approach?
It's not a zero-sum game. So multiple methods can be used to complement each other to achieve maximum results because you have limited resources, right? I think the government has mentioned that impose an island-wide lockdown is just not very feasible because it takes up a lot of resources and planning. So health experts here have said that generally more than 90% of people turn up for the mandatory tests. And then there are people who also turn up on their own if you have those specimen collection stations in their vicinity. So what the health experts are now saying is that the government needs to set up more specimen collection stations, particularly in hot zones. And while that's going on, you've got the targeted testing. So your cabbies are tested, your frontline staff are tested. And then, the key here is to be able to identify and locate, close contacts, identify those who are infected and the close contacts of those who are infected, so that you can isolate them and so that you can cut the transmission chains in the community. But the next big hurdle will be Chinese New Year, obviously, because there will be gatherings. And when we surround ourselves with food, we will eat, and that comes removing masks. So the chances of getting it from someone who's infected if you have a gathering would be higher.
Right, Claire, just on CNY celebration, now ahead of the celebration, is Hong Kong looking at implementing any stricter measures to curb the virus spread during the holiday season?
So for weeks already, the government has sort of tried to pave the way to ease people into realizing that this is going to be a quiet New Year, Chinese New Year. They have had U-turns on the flower markets. They finally decided to actually let the fairs go on. So you've got all the Chinese New Year fairs, right, which is a big thing here. So they didn't want people to congregate in just Mong Kok Flower Market, and so they would rather have people and they can do crowd management control and things like that. So already they are saying, and they have previously warned that the government can actually step in to regulate private parties if they have to.